Good morning.
Welcome back to Department 1, People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. Our jurors and alternates have returned. Welcome back. We have Mr. Henderson at council table and Mr. Lewin, Mr. Milius, and Mr. Bailey, and present also for the people. Mr. Henderson, what do the people intend to present today?
This morning we may have 3 live witnesses, but we're going to start off with a stipulation. I'd like to mark that stipulation as People's 237. This was originally stipulation 34. The parties stipulate to the following. When defendant Robert Durst was arrested at Wegmann's grocery store on November 30th, 2001, he had arrived in a 1996 red maroon Chevy Corsica. Defendant Robert Durst had rented that vehicle from a rental agency in Mobile, Alabama on October 17, 2001. When defendant Robert Durst rented the vehicle, it had an Alabama license plate attached to the vehicle of 2CD9800. Defendant Robert Durst rented the Corsica under the name of Morris Black and used Morris Black's identification to rent the vehicle. When defendant Robert Durst was arrested at Wegmann's grocery store on November 30th, 2001, the Corsica had Maryland license plates bearing number DNT572 on the vehicle and not the original Alabama license plates. So stipulated, counsel?
Stipulated.
All right, court accepts the stipulation.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes. You said it was 237, is that right? All right.
People call Kathleen Piermattei.
Yep. Oh, really? Looks like we left off at 235A.
Okay, so this should be 236?
Yes.
Okay. We can remark it.
You may stand, raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Please be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name.
Kathleen Piermattei, Catherine Pierma, Pierma, Ttei. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Will you, a couple things, will you please pull that mask up a bit higher so that it doesn't slide down?
Okay.
And will you speak directly into that microphone? Our masks muffle us a little bit,
Oh.
so if you talk right into that microphone when you testify, we'll all hear you well. You'll be
Okay.
amplified.
Okay.
Your Honor,
Yes.
before Mr. Henderson begins, we believe that 236 might have been the clip SG064.
May we approach sidebar for a moment, Your Honor?
Oh, all right, while they work that out, we'll approach sidebar. Get the right number for that.
smiling.
All right, that's probably the interruption. Got that, we'll deal with that in a bit. You may go ahead, Mr. Hinkle.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Morning.
I want to take you back to November 30th of 2001 at about noon at a Wegmann store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Were you working at that Wegmann store at that time?
Yes,
What were you doing for a living back then?
I was a loss prevention division manager for Wegmans
And at that point, how long had you been working at Wegmans?
since 1991,
And when did you leave Wegmans?
2004.
So back on November 30th, 2001, what were your duties?
I was responsible for the security operations for Pennsylvania, some of New Jersey, and I was responsible for training personnel, overseeing some of the administrative duties, policy.
On that particular day at that store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, what were you doing?
I was training a new security employee.
Would that be Nick Westgate?
Yes.
And at about noon, where exactly were you in the store?
In the security office, probably.
And we don't have Wegmans out here. Can you briefly describe what the store is?
It's a very large, modern type of store. I often refer to it as like the Macy's of grocery. Very high end, a lot of unique product, a lot of different departments, and this particular store was one of the newer ones with 2 stories.
So it had 2 stories. Approximately how many cash registers?
Quite a bit. I'd probably at least 60, 70 throughout the store.
And were there also cameras?
Yes.
About how many?
Probably, I don't know, 100 maybe. I mean, there's quite a bit, quite a few, all over the store, in the parking lot, in the back room, everywhere.
And on that day, at about noon, were you looking at the cameras?
Most likely, yes.
And did you have control over those cameras?
Yes.
Does that mean you could rotate them, you could zoom in and out,
Yes.
and you could also switch between cameras?
Yes.
I'd like to mark as People's 237. Next in order.
Did we finalize that? That's 237.
Still trying to figure it out.
Okay, tentatively, do we want to skip ahead one? For some reason, there's a lost track right in between 236 and 237. The next one, shall we mark it 238 just in case?
I don't think it hurts, Your Honor, for us if we skip one.
Yeah.
Just skip one.
We'll make it 238 and we'll double back if we need to.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'll mark this DVD. It's a Wegmans surveillance video. That's People's 238 for now. It's a 17-second clip. I'm going to play this and ask you if you recognize it.
My notes are in chambers, so that's all. Okay.
So we're about 7 seconds in. Do you recognize what we're looking at?
Yes,
How do you recognize it?
because it was a shoplifter that Nick and I were watching.
So you were watching this on the camera as while it went down?
Right, when we were, it looks familiar because that was something that we were watching on the camera.
And you had the control to switch between different cameras, different angles?
Right, there were a couple of keyboards, so both of us would go back and forth, however it was.
So I'll play People's 238 for you once more. Can you tell us what we're seeing?
We're seeing, obviously, an older man open up a package of Band-Aids there. We see him taking a sandwich out of a case towards the front of the store and putting it in a newspaper.
So I'll play it for you one more time. People's 238.
So it's a Band-Aid coming out of a package.
So that area where the Band-Aids were taken, were you watching that area or were you watching this individual?
We always watch that area because it's a high theft area. So we always have the cameras, when anybody see what's going on.
So no matter what they look like, you're monitoring that first aid area?
Absolutely.
And what did you see this individual put in his pocket?
He opened up a package of Band-Aids and just took one or whatever it was, and then, but that's considered retail theft. So at that point, we knew we were going to stop him.
So at that point, you're just doing your job and you're following this guy?
Right, because when he opened the Band-Aids and then, like I said, even though it's only a couple pieces or whatever it was, we knew he took at least one out and put it in his pocket. So we knew we were going to stop him at that point. So we kept following him.
So at this point in the video, it's about 12:04, is that fair?
Yes.
Just afternoon?
Yeah.
Did you lose track of this individual shortly after this happened?
We did. We lost track of him. Then we somehow, I don't remember, it was so long ago, but I think we assumed he went upstairs to read the paper. Because he came, I think next time we saw him come down the stairs, I believe. So that's what I remember, I think. Yeah.
But just to be fair, you didn't specifically see him upstairs.
No, I don't remember. We had cameras upstairs too. I just don't remember. When we caught back up with him, we saw him again. Once again, he shoplifted the sandwich. And then we knew for sure that we both had him both times.
And what was upstairs?
It was a seating area for people to eat.
And I'll continue with People's 238. So now, stopping at about 5 seconds, it now says 12:21. It's about 17 minutes later. What do we see here?
That's a prepared food area where we had sandwiches and salads and things like that. And the parking lot to let him know that's not an option. Is it falling? It keeps falling down? I'm sorry.
It's okay. It just flow back when it does.
So he's got the money in his hand. He says his ID is in his car. You tell him he's not going to his car. What do you do next?
Then when he comes in, he was cooperative. He came in and followed us, or we escorted him in. We usually walk from behind and kind of direct him where to go.
Security office?
Right.
And at that point, do you sit him down and start taking a report?
At that point, we have him empty their pockets.
Oh, so you had him empty his pockets. And what
Yes.
was in his pockets?
The money, I believe, he put back in his pocket, and so he took that back out. And I don't remember if there was anything else. I don't remember. I just remember the money. I don't know if there was key. I don't remember what else at this point. It was like 18 years ago.
Now, are you?
Well, we talked to him about his ID, and I don't know. I think we clarified that that we weren't going to go to the car and get the ID, and I knew without ID that I had to call the police. That was our policy.
And you also previously testified in Galveston. That was Galveston, Texas, October 15, 2003.
Yes.
Did you testify back in Galveston that he told you he also had the money in his car?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Did you testify in Galveston that he also had the money in his car?
That he had money in his car?
Yes.
I don't recall that.
Would it refresh your recollection and take a look at your testimony from Galveston?
Sure. Yeah, I don't recall that.
One moment, Your Honor. So I'll direct counsel to LADA date stamp 121153. This is page 128 of the transcript. Don't read aloud, but Go ahead and take a look at lines 5 through 8.
I've been reading this, I don't recall. If anything, I would say I'm sorry. If anything, I would say that he had the ID in his card. If he said he had money in his card, I guess because he had money on him, I didn't focus on that.
So your best memory now is that he told you he had ID in his car, and in Galveston you stated, referring to the defendant, he stated that he had money in his car to pay for it?
Okay, according to that, yes, but I don't recall that.
Whether it was the money or the ID that was in his car, is your recollection clear that he wanted to get back to that car?
Correct.
And while he's in the office, what do you have to do for your paperwork?
We have to, what we usually do is, if they have ID, we take his ID and write down information from the ID. And ask them if that's their current address, if it's a female, current last name. So we try to get as much accurate information as we can, but when they do not have ID, we phone the police and just start going from what they tell us.
So not in all these cases. In all these cases, you have choices, right? You don't have to call the police?
No, we don't have to call the police, but we just, because of the liability and Wegmann's being such a successful company, we do it for liability purposes. So a person can't come back and say that they weren't them, or if they try to have a lawsuit against Wegmann's, we want accurate information of who this is.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying it was store policy, if they don't have ID, you got to call the police.
Exactly. Sometimes we will ask them, can someone bring you ID then? And then if that's the case, then we'll wait for the ID to come. But most of the time, we just like to process folks and get them moving. So
in terms of processing folks, you're asking him his name?
we ask name, address, date of birth. I think the social security number might be on that form. I don't recall the form, but it's all like personal data about the person.
And this form, this is a form you filled out that same day, helping Nick fill it out right after this happened? Is that right?
Yes.
And did you ask him his name?
One of the first things we do is ask the name. That's the first thing on the form, whether there's a date and the time, and then we ask their name.
And what did he tell you his name was?
Well, not that I remember right now in my head, but according to the form, it had to be what he told us. It said, I believe, Robert Durst.
So was your memory more clear back then?
Sure, absolutely.
And did you write down accurately what happened after it happened?
Absolutely.
And did you also provide this information to Officer Benner, who's going to be our next witness?
Yes.
I'd like you to take a look at this report, LADA 101366. And go ahead and read his name into the record.
Robert Durst.
And did you ask him his address?
I would have to ask the address because there's an address on here.
So go ahead and read that address into the record.
377 Rector Place, New York City. It says New York 10280.
And you folks asked him his social security number?
There's a social security on here, so we must have, yes.
Go ahead and read in what he told you.
027380217.
So that's a social ending in 0217.
Yes.
Thank you. After you're filling out this form, what do you do?
Well, by that time, I only knew I was going to call the police, so I left the office and phoned the police.
And was that Officer Benner who came out?
Yes,
He was with the Colonial Police Department?
yes.
And fair to say at the time, you didn't know what was in his car,
No.
but you know now.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Piermattei, I'm Dick DeGuerin, and we've seen each other before, haven't we?
I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Well, in fairness to you, you've had some health problems and some medication problems that have affected your memory. Is that right?
You mean since the last trial that happened?
Yes.
Yes.
You don't, well, now, do you recognize me?
I'm sorry, sir, I
Okay.
don't.
I took off my mask for the record.
You're a little older, Mr. DeGuerin.
I saw pictures. He looks pretty much the same.
He does look the same.
Yeah, I don't think he's changed. He hasn't aged.
I've been taking care of myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get your answer. Your memory is not what it might be because of the health that you've had and some medication. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. I know that in your career, you've probably seen a lot of different things, haven't you?
In my loss prevention career, yes.
But in your career, what you saw and what you witnessed that day has to rank pretty high among the most bizarre you've seen. Isn't that right?
I would say, to me, he was, Mr. Durst was no different from other shoplifters that we apprehended. If anything, he was more cooperative. I've had people, be very uncooperative, but, so it wasn't bizarre or anything like that to us.
Let me tell you what I'm asking.
Okay.
Mentioning him, so clearly identifying the defendant when she spoke.
He looks significantly different today, doesn't he?
From what I could tell, we're 18 years older, yes.
So am I, but he looks significantly different than he did that day, doesn't he?
From the photo that I see here, yes.
And I wasn't really asking about cooperativeness, but I will go there since you've mentioned it. He was cooperative with you, right?
Yes, there was nothing that, you said the word bizarre, that was not bizarre about that apprehension.
Where I'm going with the bizarre, Mr. Durst that day had a completely shaved head, didn't he?
Yes.
And shaved eyebrows, right?
Yes.
And by the time you arrested him or stopped him, the Band-Aid that you saw him take out of the Band-Aid box had been placed on his upper lip. Is that right? You remember that?
It was someplace on his face. I don't remember where, but yeah, it was somewhere.
Well, with the shaved head, shaved eyebrows, and a Band-Aid that he just stolen on his upper lip, that's kind of bizarre, isn't it?
I'm sorry, we really weren't concentrating on, when we watch shoplifters, we watch their hands and we watch the merchandise, so we might zoom in on someone to make sure we recognize their face if you see them again, but we watch their hands and merchandise more than anything, because that's what steals, the hands, the motion, and the merchandise.
Okay, fair enough. But when you went to fill out the form, he gave you his name as Robert Durst, right?
Yes, according to the name on the form, so that's what we wrote down, so that's what he told us.
And you said that he, at some point, had reached in his pocket to show you money that he had, right?
Yes.
You remember that money was over $500?
I remember that it was a large amount.
Does over $500 sound about right?
Sure. It was a large amount, yes.
That's a little unusual for a shoplifter, isn't it?
To have that much money on them, yes.
Okay. This is not meant to be misogynistic, but you're a lady, and you're a security officer. Have there been times when you felt that your safety was threatened by a shoplifter?
Yes.
But you didn't feel that way that day, did you?
No.
And of course, you had a man with you who was learning the trade of being a security officer, and it was his first time. Did he have law enforcement training?
No.
Did you have law enforcement training?
No.
Okay. And is it your testimony that policy of Wegmans was that had Mr. Durst had ID with him that he could show you, you would have released him after taking his information and filing some kind of complaint? Is that right?
If he would have had identification on him, we would have filled out the form, used his identification as part of the verifying the information. Then there is a part on the form that he would have had to sign. It's a release from liability for the apprehension. And it basically says, I release Wegmans all liability for the events that happened today, that type of thing. He would have to sign that, and then would have been on his way.
And you would not, under those circumstances, have even called the police?
That's correct.
That's all.
Redirect?
Briefly. Mr. DeGuerin asked you a few questions about health problems and your memory. Would you agree that your memory was better back in Galveston when you testified there?
Yes, my health problems came long after that, so. Yeah.
And Mr. DeGuerin also asked a series of questions about not feeling threatened. Do you remember that?
Yes.
When you found out he had a gun in the car,
That calls for hearsay.
That does not call for hearsay, Your Honor. Hold on just a moment.
It doesn't call for hearsay, but assumes a fact not in evidence.
What was that, Your Honor?
Assumes a fact not in evidence, so I'll sustain that. Why don't you?
Your Honor, can we just, the grounds that it's sustained on, so we can address.
Assumes facts not in evidence.
Assumes facts not in evidence.
So you may establish
It's
that.
going to come in through another witness, the next witness, but as far as this witness is concerned, that's something she learned later and by hearsay.
Okay, so hearsay is overruled.
so it's a stipulated factor on it.
Very
I'm
well.
not stipulating, it's coming in, but
Okay, you're not objecting on those grounds. You're objecting on hearsay grounds.
hearsay and facts not in evidence.
Okay, facts not in evidence. Very well. Sustained.
Your Honor, the facts not in
Okay,
evidence.
okay, sidebar.
Thank you.
Objection sustained. Will you rephrase your question?
Thank you. A few questions, maybe 2 or 3. Did you later find out that there was a gun in the car?
And that calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Yes.
And Mr. DeGuerin asked you, at the time, your interaction with Mr. Durst outside the supermarket, and you testified that you didn't feel threatened in the
No.
moment.
What my question? That's, what my question?
It's okay. So rephrase your question. It's appropriate to ask if she felt threatened at the time.
Did you feel threatened at the time?
The defense established that he was cooperative, and you're asking a related question: Did she feel threatened? So you may answer: Did you feel threatened at the time?
No.
Now, after you learned he had a gun in the car, did that change that opinion?
I'm not sure how to answer that because by then he was already in custody with the police. So, but if I knew he had a gun in the car, I definitely would have felt threatened.
Thank you. That's all.
No questions.
All right. Thank you. May the witness be excused.
Yes, thank you.
Defense? Yes.
Yes.
You're excused, ma'am. Thank you.
Next, Your Honor, we have another stipulation.
Okay.
I'd like to mark as People's 239, Stipulation 35. The parties stipulate to the following. On November 30th, 2001, Colonial Regional Police Department Sergeant Darren Wendling responded to Wegmann's grocery store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. When Sergeant Wendling arrived, defendant Robert Durst was in the custody of Wegmann's grocery store loss prevention officers. Sergeant Wendling used keys that were recovered from defendant's pocket to unlock the car door on a Chevy Corsica, Maryland license DNT 572, parked in the Wegmann's parking lot. Sergeant Wendling unlocked the door and immediately locked it back up to verify that it was the correct vehicle the defendant had been driving. Sergeant Wendling then had the vehicle towed to the impound garage at the police station. Sergeant Wendling did not tamper with the vehicle. The vehicle was not tampered with from the time he arrived at Wegmann's until the time the vehicle was subsequently searched pursuant to a search warrant. So stipulated, counsel.
Stipulated.
And next, Your Honor, we have
The
another
court accepts the stipulation. Now, I just want to, did you clarify that we had 236?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe there was a mistake in my note-taking, and we did not have a 236 on Thursday.
So 230, the stipulation was 236. We skipped ahead to 238 for the next.
So the last one on Thursday should have been 235. I incorrectly thought that there was a 236. Stipulation should have been 236 today instead of 237, which we orally said at the beginning of testimony. And then that leaves us with the video we just saw, which we marked as 238. If we want to renumber it as 237, then we would be consistent with that.
And we'll stipulate, Your Honor, if the defense will to renumber so we don't have an empty.
No, we're fixing it now. 237 was the video. 238 is. So is this stipulation 238?
Stipulation 35 is now 238.
All right, now you may call your witness.
Thank you.
Well, before the next witness, Your Honor, we do have another stipulation.
Okay, which is.
This one I'll correctly mark. It's going to be People's 239. It's a 4-page stipulation. With 239, I'd like to mark collectively 36 photos, photos 1 through photo 36, as People's 240.
Thank you.
Parties stipulate to the following. Gary Hammer is a sworn police officer in the Colonial Regional Police Department in the state of Pennsylvania. On November 30th, 2001, Officer Benner was working at the Colonial Police Department headquarters when he transported defendant to the headquarters for booking. While at the police headquarters, Detective Hammer learned that defendant had an outstanding arrest warrant for murder in Galveston, Texas, as well as bail jumping. On December 5th, 2001, Detective Hammer then sought and obtained a search warrant to search the 1996 red Chevy Corsica, bearing Maryland license plate number DNT572. The defendant had parked in the Wegmann's parking lot before he was arrested inside the store. The vehicle had been towed to a police impound garage, where it was secured and safeguarded pending a search. No one disturbed the contents of the vehicle prior to the search. On December 5th, 2001, pursuant to the search warrant, Detective Hammer searched this red Chevy Corsica. The vehicle is depicted in photos 1 through 2. Photos 1 through 2 fairly and accurately depict the vehicle as it appeared on December 5th, 2001. Detective Hammer searched the interior of the vehicle. He recovered a hat and 2 pairs of gloves from the passenger side dashboard. Photo 3 on the screen is a fair and accurate picture depicting these items as Detective Hammer found them. Photo 4 is a fair and accurate picture of the hat after it was removed from the vehicle. Photo 5 is a fair and accurate picture of one of the pairs of gloves after they were removed from the vehicle. Photo 6 is a fair and accurate picture of the other pair of gloves after they were removed from the vehicle. Detective Hammer searched the glove compartment of the vehicle. Among other items, the glove compartment contained a Taurus .38 caliber revolver, fully loaded with 5 rounds of hollow point ammunition, a Ziploc bag filled with 39 rounds, .38 caliber hollow point ammunition, paperwork from Rent-A-Wreck car rental agency, and a pack of Marlboro cigarettes. There were no forms of identification contained within the glove compartment. Photos 7 on the screen through 8 fairly and accurately depict the items contained within the glove compartment as Detective Hammer found them. Photo 9 fairly and accurately depicts the contents of the glove compartment after the glove compartment was removed from the vehicle. Photo 10 is a photograph of this weapon. Photo 11 is a photograph of this ammunition. Already admitted with Detective Coulter was People's Exhibit 166, which was the actual .38 caliber Taurus revolver that was removed from the glove compartment. Photos 12 through 15 fairly and accurately depict the paperwork that was recovered from the glove compartment. On the front seat, Detective Hammer found a New York area road map. Photos 16 through 17 fairly and accurately depict this map as it was found by Detective Hammer. On the rear passenger seat, among other things, Detective Hammer found a black Rugby North America brand bag. Photo 18 fairly and accurately depicts this bag, as Detective Hammer found it on the back seat. Photo 19 fairly and accurately depicts this bag after it was removed from the vehicle. Detective Hammer searched this black bag. Inside one compartment of the black bag, he found a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver, fully loaded with 5 rounds of hollow point ammunition. Loose in the same compartment of the black bag with the handgun were 10 additional rounds of .38 caliber hollow point ammunition. Photo 20 on the screen fairly and accurately depicts the handgun and these rounds as they were first seen by Detective Hammer. Photo 21 is a photograph of the handgun. Photo 22 is a photograph of the ammunition. Already admitted through Detective Coulter was People's Exhibit 165, which was the handgun recovered from this black bag. Inside a separate area of this same black bag, Detective Hammer found defendant's passport, a Fleet Visa credit card in the name of Emilio Vignani, a Staybridge Suites receipt in the name of Emilio Vignani, and a green ink pen. Photo 23 fairly and accurately depicts these items as Detective Hammer saw them when he searched this compartment, the black bag. Photos 24 through 29 are fair and accurate photographs of each of these items after they were removed from the bag. Detective Hammer also searched the trunk of the vehicle. Inside the trunk, he found a blue nylon duffel bag. From inside this blue bag, We recovered a Ziploc baggie containing 37 rounds of .38 caliber hollow-point ammunition. Photo 30 is a photograph of this ammunition. Inside the trunk, Detective Hammer also found a black nylon duffel bag. Inside this black duffel bag, Detective Hammer found Morris Black's South Carolina driver's license, Morris Black's Medicare insurance card, $36,800 in United States currency, and marijuana. Photo 31 on the screen is a fair and accurate picture of Morris Black's driver's license recovered from this bag. Photo 32 is a fair and accurate picture of Morris Black's Medicare insurance card recovered from the vehicle. Inside the trunk of this vehicle, Detective Hammer also found a road map for Connecticut and Rhode Island, as well as a Fairfield County, Connecticut atlas. Photo 33 is a fair and accurate photograph of the map. Photo 34 is a fair and accurate photograph of the atlas. Inside the red Chevy Corsica, Detective Hammer also found a Meade 5-star spiral notebook. Admitted into evidence already, People's 167 is this notebook. Photo 35 is a photograph of the cover of the notebook. Inside this notebook, Detective Hammer found a handwritten note on Hilton Garden Inn stationery. This handwritten note contained Gilberta Najami's address of 753 Fairfield Avenue in Fairfield County, Connecticut. Photo 36 on the screen is a fair and accurate photograph of this handwritten note. And to clarify, that's Gilberta Najami's workplace address, not her home address. As stipulation 56, so stipulated?
Stipulation.
Or accept stipulation.
People call Dean Benner.
Sir, remain standing. Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell it for the record.
Yes. First name Dean, D-E-A-N. Last name Benner, B-E-N-N-E-R.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Taking you back to 2001, what were you doing for a living back then?
I was employed with the Colonial Regional Police Department.
And when did you first start working for the Colonial Regional Police Department?
In 1995,
And in 2001, what was your job?
patrol.
So you were a sworn police officer?
I'm sorry, what?
You were a sworn police officer at that time?
Correct.
And when did you leave the department?
I retired in 2011.
I want to take you back to November 30th of that year, 2001, strike that, at 12:36 p.m. Did you receive a dispatch for a retail theft suspect in custody at Wegmann's?
Correct, yes.
And that was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania?
Yes, Hanover Township. I was on patrol in Hanover that day and received the dispatch.
And did you arrive at about 12:46?
Yes.
What's the first thing you did?
Upon arrival, I entered the Wegmans near the loss prevention office. I then entered the loss prevention office where the loss prevention officers were there, people were there, and they had a gentleman in custody.
And when you say loss prevention officers, was one of them the woman who just walked out of the courtroom?
Correct, yes.
And the gentleman in custody, is he here this morning?
Yes, he is.
Please identify him for the court and the jury.
I'm sorry?
Please identify him, sir.
Yes, he's the elderly gentleman in the wheelchair.
Right, that's Mr. Durst.
And what was the first thing you did after you came into that room?
Spoke to the loss prevention people. They handed me the sheet of the information that they got from the suspect, the individual in custody. At that time, I didn't know who he was. He did identify himself as Robert Durst on the sheet. I got the
Sorry,
sheet.
let me just slow you down. So you're getting to the office, you're talking to the loss prevention officer who left,
Yes,
and she hands you a report.
correct.
And did you read through that report?
Yes, I looked at the report, and they told me what had occurred. And then I started to talk with the individual.
Referring to Mr. Durst?
Yeah, it turned out to be Mr. Durst, yes.
And when you say it turned out to be Mr. Durst, you
Well,
asked
when
him-
I walked in, I didn't know who it was. On the loss prevention information sheet, it said Robert Durst on it, and I asked him what his name was, and he said Robert.
So after you asked him for his name, did you ask him if he had any identification on him?
Yes, I did.
How did he respond?
He said he did not, but he said, if you take me back to my car, I have my ID. It's in the car in the glove box.
Now, I don't want to ask you any questions about you asking him what happened in the store, but specifically asking about that identification. You asked him for his ID, and he said, I'll get it from the car if you take me back there.
Correct.
And did it happen once or more than once?
It was like twice he said it.
So twice he asked if you could take him back to his car to get his ID?
Yes.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't. I just told him, that's okay, we'll figure out who you are. And, you know, I proceeded to do my job.
So when you say doing your job, what's the next step?
Well, per loss prevention sheet, it said he was from New York. I asked him where he was from, and he said he was from New York. Now, in Pennsylvania law is if you're an out-of-state individual, you have to be arraigned before a district judge. So,
We don't quite have that same process here. Could you briefly describe it for the jury?
sure. A district judge is somebody that is elected. They serve a 6-year term, and they have a district. It's just a certain geographical area, and we have, I don't know, I think like 57 or something like that statewide. And they do. That's the first line when somebody's arrested, no matter what it is. They have their preliminary hearing is held in front of the district judge, and the district judge finds enough evidence to send it down to county court, where it's seen by a county judge and beyond. So the district judge is the first step. So in this scenario, because it was only a summary offense, but he was out of state, what we have to do is take him in front of the district judge, and then the district judge will then determine, if he needs to be, if he has the money to pay on a summary fine, he could pay it and be released, and that would be the end of it. If it's a misdemeanor or a felony, then obviously he gets arraigned, and the process will continue from there. So that is the first line of the judges that he sees. So in this case, because he was from New York, I had to take him into custody and take him in front of the magistrate to be arraigned on the summary charge.
So what I'm understanding is because he's out of state, You had to do a few more steps. You had to take his information. You had to take him to a judge.
Correct.
Now, before this whole process, he was telling you he wanted to get out to his car, right?
Correct.
Did he specify where in that car he wanted you to take him?
He had mentioned that he had an ID, his ID was in the glove box.
You didn't search the car at that time, did you?
I did not know.
So I'll show you photo 9 from People's 240. You didn't know that's what was in the glove box?
I had no idea.
And ultimately, you decided not to take him out to his car.
Yeah, I specifically told him, don't worry about it, we'll figure out who you are.
Now, when you took him, well, what happens next? You know you have to go through this process. What do you have to do with him?
Well, because I have to, take him to go in front of the magistrate or the district judge, I have to take him into custody, so I handcuffed him and searched his body for any weapons that may harm himself or me. In that pat down, I found a set of car keys and $523 in cash.
So how much had he shoplifted from the store?
He had shoplifted, I believe, a handful of Band-Aids, a sandwich, and a newspaper. I think it was like $9 and some cents change.
And he had $523 on him?
Correct.
And so he's handcuffed, you search him, you find the keys and the cash. Where do you take him next?
Well, after I searched him, we walked out of the loss prevention office, exited the Wegmans where my car was sitting, and I put him in my car.
And after he's in the car, do you go to the station?
Correct.
And at the station, are there standard booking questions you have to ask him, basically filling out a form about his identifying information?
Correct. And so I started asking him routine questions for the paperwork. Again, his name, his address, date of birth, phone number, et cetera, social security number. And when we got to the social security number, he had given me a different number than what was written on the loss prevention sheet from Wegmans.
So you had that loss prevention sheet from Wegmans?
Correct.
And the number he gave you, what were the last 4 digits?
I'd have to look.
Would it refresh your recollection? Take a look at your report?
It would.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. He had given loss prevention 027380217. When I asked him what his social security number is, he said 027323616. So the last 5 digits were different than what he told loss prevention.
And did that set off some alarm bells for you?
Yeah. So what I did, he seemed very agitated and upset. So I calmed him down and I ran his information and I ran both numbers. And here it turned out when he was talking to me, he gave me his real information. And when I ran it through county dispatch, they came back and asked if I had him in custody, and I said yes. And they said because he's wanted in Galveston, Texas for a homicide.
I don't want to go too far into what other people told you, but ultimately the case gets handed off to Detective Hammer after that, correct?
Yeah.
And now I've been avoiding asking you any questions about what you asked him about what happened. Is it your testimony today that you simply asked him for his identification, and he asked you to take him to his car, take him to his glove box?
Yes.
And how confident are you of that memory?
I'm 100%.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
on the screen is what's in evidence, let's see, I believe it's exhibit.
It's 240 page, or photo 25.
So obviously a photograph of Mr. Durst's passport found later in a search. You never saw that yourself, though, did you?
No.
The evidence is it was in the car.
Yeah, I never dealt with anything in the car.
Okay.
That was all done by a detective and a sergeant.
But obviously, assuming, of course, that the detectives found that passport in the car, which is the evidence here, he did have ID in the car, didn't he?
Yes, I assume so. Yeah. I didn't know firsthand. According to follow-up reports of the search of the vehicle, yes, he had forms of ID in the car.
Right. And this is a subject of a stipulation that we just made before the jury. You weren't in the courtroom when that happened. That's fine.
Okay.
It appears that the signature on the passport is in green ink. Does it appear that way to you?
I don't know. Perhaps.
Okay. Are you aware that one of the things found that we've just stipulated to, the jury's heard about, was a green pen?
Okay.
You weren't aware of that?
No.
Okay, that's fine. When you got the information that Robert Durst, who was in your custody at that time, was wanted in Galveston for homicide, you turned to him and said something like, when was the last time you were in Texas?
Yes.
Didn't you? He had been somewhat agitated and before that moment, right? Is that right?
Yeah. He just seemed upset, you know.
But as soon as you said that, he seemed defeated, didn't he?
Yeah. He just got quiet.
Just caught.
Kind of, yes. Yes.
No further questions.
Anything else?
Very briefly.
Okay. So we reached a stipulation. Counsel asked you about this passport we see on the screen.
Yes.
Stipulation is that was found in the rear passenger seat, among other things, in a black Rugby North America brand bag. And he asked you if you wanted to go to the glove box,
Yes.
and People's 9, that's what's in the glove box.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
There you go.
No.
May this witness be excused.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Then you're excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take our morning recess until 10:35 to 10, we'll make it 10:40. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. Record before there was any testimony from Catherine Piermattei. Mr. DeGuerin objected to all evidence from Galveston, including this evidence specifically under 1101 and 352. This is just renewing an objection I've reviewed a number of times, and defense even took a writ on it. I see nothing to change my ruling. Nothing new, right, Mr. DeGuerin?
Well, I've also made the objection as cumulative at this point. As it seems like we're trying Galveston rather than the Susan Berman killing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is obviously these are circumstances of the flight, which is very significant to the offense itself and the charge offense and the special circumstance. But the one concern is that the fact that he's stealing, I guess it's an infraction there. He called it a summary offense. That I don't. Obviously, that's not offered to impugn his character. It's a circumstantial around the flight. So I don't know if you need an instruction on that or not. I suspect not. But if you want to draft one, that's all right. Mr. Lewin, did you wish to make a record?
Yes, Your Honor. I don't believe, first of all, I don't think an instruction is necessary. If the defense wants it, we won't object to it. It's also important, this is not, the flight from Pennsylvania is not just about Galveston. The flight intertwines with Kathy because of what's found in the car, the stuff relating to Gilberta, the Pennsylvania jail calls, etc. Also, this would not be cumulative. The objection that he's really making is that it's 1101B. Cumulative would be if we put on other evidence that would be the same as what we put on. We haven't put on this evidence before, so it would not be cumulative at all. It would be, if anything, a violation of 1101B, and the court's made an extremely detailed record on this issue. That's all I needed to say, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. DeGuerin?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. We'll go to recess.